This was the time when I was most scared in my whole life, and it changed everything for me. Let me start by saying this is something I've had to go through, and there are still some things about it I don't really understand. And though over the past 21 years I've learned a lot about what really happened, I'll tell it from my 7-year-old perspective, because that's the way I remember it. I lived with my mom. My parents had been divorced for 3 years, which, for a 7-year-old, is like forever. My mom back then was someone who took extra care with me. She didn't like it when I played in the yard. She didn't like it when I spent a lot of time at our neighbor's house. She always dropped me off at school and was waiting for me at the end of the day to take me home. She taught me how to lock all 3 locks on our door, and how to see what different cars were parked outside, and, of course, stranger danger. She was, I now understand, quite paranoid. One night we were sitting on the couch watching TV when a small pickup truck pulled into our driveway. This was really strange because we weren't expecting anyone, but what was even worse was my mom's reaction. I'd never seen her move so fast. She leapt up from the couch to make sure the door was locked. Then she ran to me and picked me up, hard, and carried me to her bedroom in the back, and had me hide under the bed. She ran out of the room and closed the door behind her. There was a man pounding on the front door, and she started yelling and screaming at him. Then all of a sudden there was this giant crash. A moment later, the bedroom door flew open, and my mom ran inside. There was a big man behind her, and I could see the cuffs of his jeans and the toes of his black and brown shoes, and my mom was screaming. She tried to turn around and slam the door shut, but suddenly it pushed open, and she was thrown onto the bed above me. The heels of her bare feet were by my head, and the man's shoes were in the doorway. There was complete silence for a moment, before my mom started to quaver audibly. I heard these 2 really, really loud pops, like chitty chitty bang bang, but nothing moved. Then the man's feet ran away. I heard his truck start and pull out of the driveway. I waited for my mom to come get me. Her feet slid down to touch the floor. Then the rest of her came down too. Her hair was all messy, like what happens when you've been sitting up reading with your head against a pillow, and it gets frizzy. She had her back to me, curled up with her knees against her chest, and her nightshirt was pulled up in her armpits. I was about to ask her if she was okay, and put my hand on her back when I saw the pool of liquid coming toward me from under her body. I flew away from her, out from under the bed, on the other side of the room. I think I was probably yelling at her or something. It seemed like just a few seconds passed. Pressed as hard against the wall as I could with my face buried in the baseboard, before I began to hear sirens. It was a big city, so I was used to the noise, but it got louder and louder until I clamped my hands over my ears. More feet ran through the front door into my house. I thought the man had come back. They were heavy feet. I heard people yelling police, and I thought that's what I needed. I needed police. The rest of the night was feet stomping and blankets, and I was whisked past my mom so that I couldn't see her. I remember really wanting to tell them to help her, but I couldn't get the words out. It took a long time for me to forgive myself for that. They put her into an ambulance while I stood out on the front lawn. I went in a police car behind. They say she died in the ambulance. So, the questions that were answered for me later on don't really help, but here they are. My dad cheated on my mom, so she cheated on him. The guy she was with decided to leave his wife for my mom, and my dad left because everything was so messed up. My mom felt guilty and broke it off with the guy. He was upset at how she had ruined his life, and she had worried about him for years. He found her through a mutual friend and, well, that was that. The man went back to his apartment after that and killed himself. There was a lot of talking with the police. I talked to a lady in her room in front of a camera, and my dad came and took me to his house to live. My dad really wasn't all that into kids, so I kinda just pulled inside myself and worked on school. I went to college and have a good job and friends and all that, but I've learned not to talk about this. It's just scary and sad, and I've spent most of my life only talking about it to therapists. Despite what you see on TV, I didn't block it out or lose all the details or whatever. I remember every moan of that night. Every breath, footstep, noise, and whimper. And I always will. I'm a 28-year-old guy, currently working as a volunteer at a pet rescue shelter. I've been working like this for about 2 years, and I love this job. This story happened about a year ago. It all began when a new girl started working at the shelter. I'll call her Gracie. Gracie was 21 years old and incredibly shy, or at least it seemed that way at first. During her first few weeks, she would only talk in one-worded sentences no matter what she was asked about. No matter how often the rest of us tried to get her involved in social stuff, she would decline. A few weeks in, she started making comments like, "I just don't like people," and "I just prefer to be left alone." People obliged and left her alone. When she had been working for the shelter for about a month and a half, she started following around a few guys like a lost puppy, drooling over them when she thought no one was watching. I was one of those guys. Her behavior was outright creepy, as she was still not talking very much, just following people around, staring at them like a dog in heat. At one point, I went straight with her, and told her I found her behavior very creepy. I told her she should be careful because some might interpret her behavior as sexual harassment. She just looked away. Shit went down a few weeks later when I managed to stumble upon Gracie's Tumblr. Gracie had submitted a picture of herself standing with one of the pups at the shelter. She had added a lot of hashtags about our local shelter, apparently in an attempt to spread awareness. Out of curiosity, I went to her actual Tumblr and, oh boy, it was just a Pandora's box of creepy shit. Basically, Gracie's Tumblr could be split into 3 parts. One part was pictures of random people, most of which were people at work. All the pictures had stories attached about how the person in the picture was a bad person. Most of these stories were about how the person had been bullying Gracie, or had been making sexist or homophobic comments, and acting like a generally shit person. All of the last kind of stories ended with Gracie stepping in and telling the person to check their privilege, as if the stories weren't unbelievable enough on their own. The next part was a picture of guys Gracie thought were hot. Both real and fictional, in between the pictures were stories about these people, mixed in various relationships. Gracie had even made up stories about these 2 guys at work being together, and she had countless pictures of them doing stuff like talking, caring for an animal, or notions of, "See, they're totally in love, gays are so cute." Both of these guys were in healthy relationships at the time. The last part was Gracie either reblogging or submitting texts about social justice, especially from the extremists part of Tumblr. I found a post talking about a guy at work who had told her off just because she had been looking in his direction. The conclusion to the post was, "I don't see what his problem is anyway. Guys think about sex all the time. It's not like it's a violation when guys actually want sex. They can't actually get sexually harassed because they would never actually object to sex." The post had been reblogged with various comments of dumb cis scum. Now, at first, I wasn't sure what to do about all this. I knew something definitely had to be done about it, but I didn't know what. In the end, I went to my boss and we had a talk. She told me this was probably just Gracie living in a fantasy world, but acknowledged that it had to stop. The three of us had a talk, and Gracie was utterly humiliated someone had found her Tumblr. She didn't outright apologize, but she did seem to accept that it had to stop, and understood what she was doing was borderline illegal. Over the next few weeks, Gracie became a shadow creeping around the shelter, somehow even more antisocial than she had been before. My boss only kept her around because she was always free to work at whatever odd hour was needed. Her Tumblr seemingly got deleted, but I had a creeping feeling it wasn't the end of it. About 2 weeks later, I was checking out the accounts that had been friends with Gracie's account. Mainly, I just wanted to find out how far Gracie's lies and stories had spread. Mostly it was her social justice stuff and the gay stories about the guys at work people had been reblogging. Through all this, I found out Gracie had a new Tumblr, and it was a lot creepier than the old one. The new Tumblr didn't have a lot of posts, not like the first one, but those it did have were even creepier than her old ones used to be. One of the first posts was an explanation about how she had been forced to shut down her old Tumblr. Some lies about how it was because she was supporting the gay community, and her boss thinking ill of that. The next couple posts were either updates on the gay couple and stories about them, or posts about this shitty dude at work. What made these posts really terrifying was that she had made threats about killing me. She even wrote long paragraphs about how she would strangle me, poison me, or stab me, and how great it would feel to kill off a cis scum such as I. What really made my heart jump was when I found a picture of my house. A few similar posts had been made about some of our co-workers, but apparently it was mainly me that she held a grudge towards. I went to my boss again, this time telling her I would get the police involved too, because this sort of behavior was way too far out. Gracie was called in again and got an earful, but during the entire talk it became obvious Gracie had no idea how her behavior was wrong. She told us it was just stuff inside her head, that she would never actually do it, but when asked why she had been uploading pictures of my house, why she had been stalking people and kept snapping pictures without them knowing, she just made up some bullshit about how it wasn't us in those pictures. I finally blew my fuse and told Gracie I would talk to the police, because I sure as hell wasn't going to stand by as some creep was following me around with a camera. So the police got involved, and as part of the case they confiscated her phone, which was also her camera. Apparently this led to a case of drug possession, and Gracie was later taken to jail. I don't know what happened to her then, but I'm hoping she's in a place where she can no longer upload bullshit on her blog.